What's up everybody, welcome back, and to new viewers, welcome to the channel. So this week I want to cover a topic that isn't directly about the project itself, but is related. Namely, I want to go over our solution stack, tech stack, software stack, or however you'd like to call it. But before I get ahead of myself, let me give you some quick context. When we started this navigation project, we chose to have open source as one of our values. We want to carry this not only in the products we create, but also in the tools we use day to day to create this wonderful project. And I wondered whether there were similar videos of startups and companies going over the same topic, but surprisingly, I had a hard time finding them. This is why I want to make a video showing you guys what we as Navware, the company the team started to do this whole project, use in everyday operations and which options we considered so you can adopt open source solutions into your own startup company or simply into your personal life. So after some brainstorming, I decided I'll separate the video into 3 categories that coincide where open source is able to provide some utility in the context we set within this video. Namely, the hardware and its underlying software, services, and of course, good old software. I'll put some timestamps in the descriptions for future reference and so you can find it easier in the future. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. The hardware we use within our team can be described using the following use cases: messaging, calling, and social media, collaboration, data processing and development, and of course, video editing. For messaging, calling, and social media, all team members are provided a Google Pixel. In my case, it's a Google Pixel 7, as well as quite cheap and does everything I need. In terms of operating systems, or also known as custom ROMs, I use Graphene OS. Graphene OS is, in my opinion, quite a good open source custom ROM that builds upon the security model Android already has, whilst improving privacy. For example, it has this cool feature where you can create multiple profiles, which are like these separate environments, almost as if you had 2 phones, where you can segregate apps based on specific use cases. For example, you might be a person like me that namely uses free and open source apps, or apps that are able to function without Google Play services, and that you require 2 different means such as the Aurora Store, the F-Droid Store, a Crescent, or directly from GitHub using something like Obtainium. But on the other hand, you might, for example, need to make use of proprietary social media apps that you can only acquire through the Google Play Store and require Google Play services that come with all their telemetry and tracking. Here you can use the multiple user feature to place these in another user account that's only active when you're actively on it and completely shuts down when you switch back to your main account, minimizing the amount of data these apps can see and collect. Furthermore, the developers over at Graphene OS put a lot of work into exploit mitigation and vulnerability discovery and patching, making a great choice for individuals and companies that want a hardened phone without having to compromise on usability. In addition, they provide an option to install the phone using a web USB installer, which from experience I can say makes installing the OS very easy and saves a lot of time, which is ideal as not everybody or every company has the skills to install a custom ROM. This makes Graphene OS overall a great choice. Of course, there are several other good alternatives such as Lineage OS and Calyx OS that do have a broader range of supported devices and have their own feature sets, alongside utilizing something like MicroG as a Google Store replacement. However, their installation process furthers a bit more skill and time for arguably quite similar features, which personally I did not find worth the investment, but could be considered. In terms of hardware, we use for collaboration, data processing, development, or simply set operations. We use several devices. I already mentioned that we use the Google Pixels as phones, but for basic collaboration, think word processing, spreadsheets, file sharing, browsing, developing, we want a laptop that embodied open source and utilized an open source BIOS, which, for those who don't know, is basically the software on your computer's motherboard that runs at the very start after powering on and allows the rest of the computer to start up. We'd considered several options, but eventually we chose the Starlight developed by Starlabs, as we found this compact and flexible laptop the perfect device for our team, as we're often working on the go at different locations and its size makes it very easy to carry along. Some of us also bought the stylus that they sell, as it does make sketching and designing a lot easier, but it is to note that the stylus support differs depending on the operating system used. Speaking of which, the operating system we use. When choosing the operating system, we had to take into account the amount of support and availability, it being supported by Starlight itself, and the limited amount of experience some of our team members had with certain operating systems, alongside it matching of course with our open source values. Taking all this into account, we went ahead with Linux and specifically Ubuntu, as it matched a nice balance between these factors and additionally had proper stylus support. Of course, when choosing your operating system or specific distribution, it's best to see what matches your personal needs or the needs of your company the best, as every operating system and distribution has their own pros and cons. For example, for editing these videos, I use my desktop PC that runs Arch, by the way, as I personally like its modularity and rolling release nature. However, I do admit that people coming, for example, from Windows might find it to have a steep learning curve that isn't worth the benefits, and that's a completely valid opinion to have. One last thing I want to note before moving on to the next category is the wide range of options we considered before choosing the Starlight, as Star Labs themselves sell beefier laptops such as the Starbook or the Starfighter, alongside several notable mentions such as Nova Customs, System 76, Purism, that all sell laptops that are compatible and pre-installed with Core Boot. Running a business requires the necessary tools and services that allow collaborations, whether it's sharing files, planning meetings on a calendar, or sending emails. All these services are essential in day-to-day operations. This is why I went out to look for an open source collaboration platform that fits our needs. We eventually settled on 2 platforms that are able to fit our needs in accordance to the size the company can grow to. The first one is a popular one you might have heard of named Nextcloud. This collaboration platform comes with a lot of features, from file sharing to working on files simultaneously to be able to hold video conferences. Nextcloud can do quite a lot, and its extensive list of plugins only adds to this. Nextcloud is open source and allows you to host it yourself. As a matter of fact, within our team, we currently use a self-hosted instance of Nextcloud. But I can imagine not every individual or company has the necessary skills for self-hosting or prefers to outsource its hosting. And for that, Nextcloud or one of their many partners provide hosting and support in the form of Nextcloud Enterprise, with different pricing plans that can match you or your company's needs. One of the things self-hosted Nextcloud doesn't provide, however, is mail hosting. This is another benefit of going with something like Nextcloud Enterprise, as it provides mail hosting with Roundcube, which is a popular on-premise webmail. Speaking of webmail, that brings us to one of the alternative options we considered. This open source collaboration platform, although being a bit less extensive than Nextcloud with their plugin framework, does provide a stable and unified platform with all core components you might need for collaboration, such as mailing, file sharing, document collaboration, and just like Nextcloud, it's open source and you can host it yourself. In addition to having a hosted enterprise option with support, and additionally they also offer a subscription package where they offer updates and support for companies that prefer to host open-Xchange on-premise. Although we find what open-Xchange does very cool, it does seem to be geared more to larger companies, and the extensiveness of Nextcloud services fit better with our current needs as a team, which is why we chose to self-host Nextcloud. Hardware and services are nice and all, but of course they need software to be of any use. The software we use can be categorized into the following categories: Office, mailing, programming, video editing, and of course photo editing. As we use Linux on our devices, we only saw 2 options when it came to Office Suite software: LibreOffice and OnlyOffice. Having used both for a long time, I can vouch for both of them being a solid Office suite that will fit your needs. They both have their pros and cons, such as OnlyOffice not having a multi-page view like LibreOffice, which makes writing and editing larger documents, such as the script, a bit annoying, but it does have a tab system allowing you to have multiple windows as tabs within the same window, which provides a lot more oversight. When it comes to scripting, LibreOffice also has a larger language support for macros. It supports LibreOffice Basic, Bean Shell, JavaScript, Python. Meanwhile, LibreOffice only supports JavaScript. Speaking of scripting and writing code, IDEs. There exists plenty of, but we just use VS Code or VS Codium if you want the IDE with its telemetry removed, instead of doing it manually. This open source and versatile IDE supports everything we write, from our Flutter application to low-level C code for the firmware, which is why we use it for daily operations. Also part of our daily operations is 2D and 3D modeling, as we need it for our design for our navigation companion. For this we use computer-aided design software, also known as CAD. I'll start to admit that open source computer-aided design software has a lot less choice available compared to their proprietary counterparts. However, options are still available. For example, for 3D modeling, we're currently using SolidWorks, as our industrial design engineer currently has the most experience with that. However, we're looking onto migrating to open source FreeCAD, as it has had quite a lot of updates since we last used it years ago. And in terms of all the open source CAD options, it seems to be the most user-friendly. Of course, we also use CAD software to design our PCBs, and for that we use KiCad, as it's quite user-friendly, has a powerful feature set that allows for complex designs. In addition to me having a good experience with it, back when I was still studying electrical engineering, alongside being open source of course. An alternative notable mention I want to throw in is LibrePCB. Its feature set is a lot simpler, allowing for less complex design, but making it a lot easier to use, which is great for simpler projects. And lastly, video and image editing, because without it, you guys wouldn't be able to watch these videos. If you've been around YouTube for a while, you might have heard a lot of different software being used by a lot of different creators. Video editing software ranging from Sony Vegas, Adobe After Effects, DaVinci Resolve to name a few. However, when comparing to open source video editing software, sadly, nobody come close to the full capabilities of these aforementioned editors. This is not to downplay the capacity of open source video editors. For example, I edit all these videos using Kdenlive, which provides quite a wide array of features and effects with which I've been able to edit these videos up until this point. And even though Kdenlive's feature set might be enough for me, for some people it might just not be what they're looking for, so I recommend you consider this when making your choice in video editors. For image editing options, we considered good old GIMP and Krita, as these options provide quite an extensive array of image manipulation tools. We eventually settled for GIMP as its workflow and features are geared slightly more towards image manipulation, whilst Krita's is geared more towards digital painting, even though I use both in the past and I can say they work pretty well for both use cases. I do want to give a honorable mention to Pinta, an open source photo editing application that attempts to provide a simple yet extensive feature set similar to Windows Paint.net. Another honorable mention I want to give is to Inkscape, as it's specifically a vector graphics editor that provides a versatile and feature-rich alternative to Adobe Illustrator. And with that, we come to the end of the video. We went over quite a list of open source solutions. Hopefully you found something useful that you can adopt in your personal life, your startup, or your company. And of course, I can imagine we haven't covered every solution, as we only went over what we looked at when adopting open source into our startup. So I'm curious if you guys know any other cool open source tools or alternative we might not have covered in this video. If you do, please let me and everybody watching know down in the comments below. And of course, wherever in the world you might be, thank you for watching.